Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me? I guess I just blew everybody's eardrums out. Please come in and get comfortable. We've got many things to accomplish this afternoon in a relatively short amount of time, so we'd like to go ahead and get started. Thank you all. My name is John McNulty. I'm the president-elect of the Society for Personality Assessment. I would like to welcome you all to this event for this year, celebrating 80 years of the Society as well as the 100th issue of the Journal of Personality Assessment. The only real work I have to do up here this afternoon is to introduce our first speaker, President Robert Archer. A little bit of background, and I had to cut this down from a 20-page dissertation-like thing to just get the essential things on here. Robert Patrick Archer, I believe, is a professor emeritus in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at Eastern Virginia Medical School, and currently a clinical and forensic psychologist with Bay Forensic Psychology. He earned his undergraduate and graduate degrees from the University of South Florida, where he completed his doctoral dissertation under the direction of Charles Spielberger, who many of us know, and completed his clinical psychology internship at the Medical University of South Carolina. Bob began his academic career in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at the Medical University of South Carolina, then moved to the University of South Florida, where he directed an innovative residential treatment program for young adults. From 1982 to 2016, he served on the faculty at the Eastern Virginia Medical School as the Frank Harold Redwood Distinguished Professor of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences and Director of the Psychology Division. While at EVMS, Dr. Archer created a forensic psychology evaluation program and a postdoctoral fellowship in forensic psychology. Dr. Archer has authored over 200 articles, 34 chapters, and 16 edited or authored books, including his Assessing Adolescent Psychopathology, the MMPIA, MMPIA-RF, now in its fourth edition, and second editions of Personality Assessment with Steve Smith, and Forensic Uses of Clinical Assessment Instruments with Elizabeth Wheeler. He is the past president of the Assessment Section 9 of the American Psychological Association, and now, of course, president of SPA. Dr. Archer served on the advisory committees to the University of Minnesota Press for the development of the MMPIA and MMPIA-RF, and he is co-author of both of those tests. He was the founding editor of the journal Assessment, served as an associate editor for the Journal of Personality Assessment, and currently serves on the editorial boards for Assessment, the Journal of Personality Assessment, and Psychological Assessment. He also provides workshops and webinars on the use of the MMPIA-RF. Dr. Archer was the recipient of the 2012 Joseph Matarazzo Award for Distinguished Contributions to Psychology in Academic Health Centers by Section 8 of Division 12 of the American Psychological Association, and in 2009, Dr. Archer received the Distinguished Assessment Psychologist Award for contributions to clinical and forensic assessment from Section 9, Division 12 of the APA. With that, it is my honor and pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Bob Archer.
That sounded really good, didn't it? Do I still have to give a talk, or can I just? On behalf of the SPA Board of Trustees, I'd like to welcome each of you to our 2018 conference. It was relatively easy for me to pick out the plenary address topic for this year because the only thing that really made sense, I think, is to talk to you about the strategic growth plan for SPA for the next 3 years. We're going to spend some time this afternoon talking about where SPA stands today in terms of its membership. And then we'll conclude by reviewing the 6 major goals that were identified in our strategic plan and the strategies that were proposed to achieve those goals over the next 3 years. This is a work in progress, and nothing I'm presenting to you today is etched in stone. We want and we would appreciate your continuing input and feedback, not just today, but over the next 3 years. The development of this plan began 6 months ago at our fall SPA board meeting, and it's involved literally the input of hundreds of SPA members. The strategic plan truly is a group effort on behalf of our organization. Many individuals have contributed a great deal to the plan, but among those that stand out are Dr. Gazelle Haas, who has played a particularly crucial role in advocating and guiding the strategic consultation process every day over the past 6 months. I've asked Dr. Haas to summarize how this plan was initiated and developed, starting with her motion for the SBA board to develop a long-term strategic plan in fall of 2017, culminating in this morning, a motion that was unanimously carried by the board to approve the strategic plan and the goals as laid out in the presentation I'm going to do today. Dr. Haas? Oh, one more step.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Giselle Haas, and I'm the secretary of the board. And this is the culmination of about 5 or 6 years that I have been in the board, and that you probably have seen some of what the process. First, I'm going to thank a number of our members and board members that have been part of this process, including Sharon Ray Jenkins, Virginia Bravender, Radhika Krishnamurti, Bruce Smith, Hadass Pade, John Porcerelli, Corinne de Ruyter, Ron Ganellan, and I hope I'm not forgetting a lot of other people, Karen Overton, Monica especially. And what happened was that when I came, we started a trend of losing members very rapidly. And you probably saw that we started trying to get free membership and invite a friend, and people will come and they will leave. And then we tried very hard to outreach, and we tried to advertise, but the numbers were not improving. They continued to go down. And then we realized as a group with all these people that I'm telling you that the issue was that we needed to have a change from within. It was not about bringing bodies, it was about us. And something that I learned is that organizations have life cycles, just like people do. And they have youth when it's all this energy and all this passion and everybody comes. Then they have adulthood and maturity. When things get stable, you create a reputation. But then we become a senior and we just want things to be the way they were always being. We want the status quo. We don't want changed. And with that comes a decline. And with that, we will shut up if we didn't really stop and try to do a transformation. So the impetus was to really create a transformation, to really come up with a second act, to have something that we can really create and serve the needs of our members, and then people will come. If we are doing well for our members, and if we keep the organization going and growing and fresh, then things are going to go well. So as you can see here, what we did, we hired a firm, actually a firm that was suggested by Catherine Nordell. And the planning step included was very methodologically sound, included interview with internal and external stakeholders, the staff, the incoming and immediate past presidents, the members of the board, but also the industry partners, convention presenters, exhibitors, a lot of our members too. There was an online survey to SPA board members and a membership survey. Also, they review our financials, they review our membership trends, and then we had a full day. And in this full day, we basically did thinking, a strategic planning to understand where the society is today, what is our potential, where is it that we want to do, what's our identity, and then after that, a series of follow-up actions. So it's really been the last 6 months has been this culmination of this long process in which we have been maturing this idea and coming up with this. Okay?
My job is to represent Father Age in the presentation today. Before we review the 6 major components of the strategic plan, I'd like to take a few moments to present the findings that we derived from our focused interviews and from our member surveys in terms of what it tells us about the composition of SBA's membership today and their attitudes, concerns, and the characteristics of this group. Next slide. For those of you that may not be familiar with the SBA organization and structure, let me provide a very brief overview. The day-to-day administration of SBA is the responsibility of our administrative director, Ms. Monica Toon, and a part-time administrative assistant. The long-term goals and directions of SBA are the responsibility of what is currently a 16-member board of trustees. The board consists entirely of volunteers who are unpaid, who meet for 3 days each fall and for 2 days during the annual conference in March to guide SBA's functioning and to set long-term goals. The board consists, in turn, of 9 elected members and 7 additional members who are appointed by the board to facilitate specific tasks. 3 of these individuals are editors: editor of JPA, the editor of the SBA Exchange newsletter, and the editor of our website. The remaining 4 individuals have specific areas of responsibility, such as coordinating the proficiency program, coordinating with various aspects of APA, etc. Next slide. The group SPA currently consists of roughly 1,200 members, 50% of whom are classified as regular members. The remaining 50% are distributed into a variety of categories. Nearly 1 out of 4 are life members or life fellows. 7% are fellows of SPA. 13% of our membership are student members. The next slide, I'm confident you cannot read in detail from wherever you're sitting unless you're sitting right 3 inches from the screen, but let me try to break it down. 13% of SBA's membership are international members, representing members from a total of 27 countries. The largest components of this international membership consist of our members in Italy and our members in Canada, with the remaining membership widely distributed across Central and South America, Europe, the Middle East, and the Far East. Membership in many organizations have been declining, as I'm sure all of you know, over the past 2 decades, and SBA is no different. It's an area of concern, and it's reflected in our findings that over the past 5 years, we've lost 11% of our membership. And as Gazelle mentioned, it's a major factor in our decision to pursue a strategic plan at this point. It's not unique to SBA. It's been experienced by the American Bar Association, by the American Psychological Association, by the American Medical Association, but it's still despite the fact that it's happening to others, it's certainly a concern for us and requires proactive planning on our part. Over the past 5 years, the major losses have occurred among life members, declined 38%, regular members declined 19%. To some extent, these have been offset by a 24% increase in student affiliates and a 10% increase in graduate student members, as well as a 22% increase in fellows. We'll be talking more about membership retention and growth issues when we get into the strategic plan. There are many pieces of good news that we received from the survey by 2B, and one one of those had to do with our conference. In particular, our conference has been well attended. Conference attendance is strong, it's growing. The largest attendance we ever experienced was 2 years ago at our annual conference in New York. Some of you may remember the snowdrifts yes. Closely followed by our 2017 conference in San Francisco. And we believe that our conference here in Washington, D.C. will reach or exceed 500. Yes, I'm getting a nod, yes, it will. Our conference are well attended by both students and as well as non-members, as well as SPA members and associates. So all of that is great news. Under the heading of not so great news is the fact that we are showing an increasing gap between the amount that we spend on conference activities and the extent to which these expenses are offset by the revenue that we generate at the conference. We've shown a consistent and growing pattern of conference net financial losses since 2014, culminating in 2017 in a net loss of $81,000. Not necessarily so much the amount of money, which is of concern, but the pattern of increasing deficits that requires some method of addressing it. Qualitative input, interview data. Our consultants interviewed 26 individuals, including 12 board members and 14 other individuals identified as SPA stakeholders. Stakeholders in this case were defined as past presidents of our student organization, convention presenters and exhibitors, SPA staff members. So let's look and see what these individuals said about SPA based on that interview data. As you might expect, the interviews generated a massive amount of data, so I'm only going to be skimming some of the highlights. Among the strengths identified in these interviews in terms of member benefits and services were the observations that SPA maintains an excellent journal, that it hosts outstanding conventions, and that it promotes a high degree of collegial networking, or what many people refer to as a family feel at the convention. Among the weaknesses was a perceived lack of benefits beyond the journal and the conference, and a need to strengthen and update our online resources, our website, and our social media presence. Next slide. Among the strengths listed in specific comments were the observations that SPA has a genuine community feel, that SPA is the preeminent leader in the field of personality assessment. Also listed were observations that the conference provides members with an important way of staying up to date with current psychometric developments and trends, and a lot of comments that students felt welcomed, supported, included in SPA conference activities. There's also some challenges. Among the challenges listed were the observations that the process and functioning of the SPA board is not clear and not understood by all of its members. We discussed this today at the board meeting, and we're under complete agreement that once we figure out what it is we're doing, we're going to post that so that you can know too. There are also concerns expressed that SPA may be too isolated, not hearing from voices in other fields, and that we could do more to advocate for personality assessment. For example, inviting experts from other fields within psychology to come to our conference and take part in our presentations, including potentially webinars and presentations at the actual conference. Next slide. So now we're going to turn to a brief review of the results we obtained from our members based on a survey, electronic survey, that we sent out to all of our nearly 1,200 members. About 30% of our total membership responded, or about 320 individuals. The percentage of U.S., 85%, to international, 15% members who responded to the survey is actually quite close to the actual division in our total membership of U.S. versus international members. Further, survey respondents generally reflected our membership in terms of where they were located regionally within the United States and cross-sectionally across the international community. Among our 1,200 members of SPA, 57% are men, 43% are women. The mean age of the males is 61.9 years. The mean age for women is 50.2 years. These characteristics of our total membership can be seen as being quite consistent with the gender and age characteristics of the survey respondents you can see. For example, 59% of the survey respondents were men, 41% were women. The largest age group corresponded to the category of 60 to 69, and nearly 1 out of 3 respondents, nearly half of our survey respondents were age 60 or older. Consistent with an aging membership, over half of our, or nearly half of our survey respondents, 46%, had been in practice for 20 years or more, while only 7% had been in practice for less than 5 years. And this is going to relate to what we talk about later in terms of a strategic plan targeted on attracting and maintaining early career psychologists to SPA membership. Survey respondents were asked to indicate what area of specialization they identified with, and they could endorse all the categories that they felt were relevant to them. Roughly 3/4 of our survey respondents identified themselves as clinicians, but 40% also identified themselves as being involved in academic or educational activities. 28% indicated that they were involved in forensic psychology. 19% reported that they were involved in research. Again, reflecting the aging nature of our membership, survey responses indicated that we had more individuals who identified themselves as retired than we did graduate student members. We asked all the survey respondents about their perceptions of how they viewed our annual conference. A large majority of the survey respondents rated all aspects of the conference experience as either good or excellent. 96% believed that registration process was good or excellent, and 93% produced a similar range of ratings for our selection of workshop topics. 95% of all survey respondents thought the overall conference experience was good or excellent. 96% indicated the quality of presenters and the content of the presentations was either good or excellent. Finally, 88% of respondents thought that the opportunities to network provided by the conference were either good or excellent. Survey respondents were asked to rate what SPA benefits and/or activities they found to be most beneficial to them. The clear winner in terms of this was our journal of Personality Assessment, which topped the list of highly valued benefits for SPA members. The journal was rated as an extremely valuable benefit by 87% of the survey respondents. Next slide. However, there were also several SPA benefits that our membership were either unaware of or did not use. 43% of our survey members fell into this category in terms of non-conference workshops that are provided by SPA, for instance, things like RPES conferences and workshops that are sponsored by SPA. And 42% didn't use or were unaware of SPA webinars. Roughly half our membership did not use or were unaware of job postings on the website or our activities in social media such as Facebook and Twitter. What are the most important activities that SPA conducts in the eyes of the membership? Survey respondents indicated that 98% of our members viewed promoting personality assessment in graduate training programs as either important or very important, which I thought was kind of a fascinating result, indicating to some degree how pervasive the fight has been to keep personality assessment as part of the curriculum in so many graduate programs. It kind of speaks to that issue. 97% of survey respondents viewed educating psychologists and other professionals about our role and its value as important or very important. Finally, 87% of our members felt that advocating for their reimbursement from payee or insurers was an important or very important activity for SPA. We asked the members to indicate what current or emerging topic area they felt was of greatest interest or importance to them. 14% of that membership indicated forensic-related topics was the greatest emerging area of interest to them. 9% indicated Rorschach, 8% indicated topics related to therapeutic assessment, and 7% indicated the area of neuropsychology. These responses have implications for the strategic plan. I think they have implications for where we target our growth. They have implications for our conference topics and for JPA, the journal, in terms of focus areas. We asked our SPA members what other organizations they belong to. And the great majority, 82%, said they belonged to the American Psychological Association, while 24% said that they were members of regional psychological organizations, for example, Southeastern Psychological Association. 24% of our members also held membership in the Association for Psychological Science, APS. We asked members of SPA to indicate the SPA division with which they also held membership. Unsurprisingly, nearly 1 in 3 SPA members are also members of Division 12, Clinical. More surprisingly, I think, and a very interesting finding to me, was the finding that 21% of SPA members also hold membership in Division 41, American Psychology and the Law. Roughly 10% of SPA members also hold membership in the following divisions: 39, Psychoanalysis, 40, Neuropsychology, Division 5, which I always get the name wrong. I think it's quantitative and qualitative methods, or it could be qualitative and quantitative methods. All right. So that's a review, a very brief review of the survey findings, where we are, where SPA is today. I'd now like to take a look at the strategic plan for the development of SPA over the next 3 years. That plan is organized around 6 major goals or objectives, each one connected to a series of strategies for reaching those goals. Our first goal is to strengthen our advocacy for personality assessment among policymakers and in the profession of psychology. There are 3 strategies that are related to obtaining this goal. The first strategy involves continuing to expand our involvement with APA and other psychological organizations that share common policy and advocacy priorities. As part of this strategy, SPA will consider, and it's actually, I think, more appropriately stated as reconsider, becoming a standalone division of APA. Notice the word consider before you attack the speaker. Steady yourself now. Consider the possibility of becoming a division of APA. There are clearly several benefits, and there are also clearly several losses connected with a closer affiliation with APA, all of which we are willing to take a close look at over the next months to consider how that balance turns out in the long run. Many of you know this is not a new issue. This is an issue that has been within SPA since the 1950s. I looked at Irv Weiner's excellent article for this issue of the journal that had to do with the history of SPA and the journal. Wonderful, detailed article, but it also it provides very interesting information about the struggle within SPA over the years about should they join as a division of APA and what would they be giving up if they did so. We're going to do it again. We're going to take a look at it again. The second strategy involves systematically involving policymakers and individuals who influence our field to come and speak at our conference and then present through our SPA-sponsored webinar series to become more involved with us. There's a strong consensus among the board that this is an important strategic step in increasing not only the size of our membership, but the influence of our membership as well. The third strategic component involves a coordinated effort to raise awareness of personality assessment psychology in undergraduate and graduate training programs. Particularly in the area of graduate training, many of our members have noted that personality assessment has been receiving decreasing curriculum emphasis over the past couple of decades. There is a clear need for SBA to advocate for personality assessment training and to help develop and support both undergraduate and graduate school programs in the personality assessment area. Goal number 2 is improving the quality of the education, training, and practice of personality assessment. Clearly a goal that's central to the core mission of our organization. There's a series of 4 strategies that have been identified related to this objective. First involves working with test authors and test publishers to develop or to increase our cooperative relationships with them, and to work with APA to increase our coordination with programs, including the Commission on Accreditation and the Board of Educational Affairs and the Clinical Practice Directory, to place greater emphasis on education, training, and practice of personality assessment within the field of psychology. The second strategy is to carefully evaluate our proficiency assessment program and to make modifications in that program where appropriate. For example, what are the goals of our proficiency assessment program, and how would we know if we succeeded or if we failed in reaching them? How do we appropriately cost this service so that it does not become prohibitively expensive over time for SPA to maintain? These are all issues we talked about to some degree in this morning's board meeting, and it'll certainly be the focus of continuing discussion. The third strategy involves increasing our online classes and face-to-face seminars to expand our continuing education offerings. Included here is the concept of the possibility of generating increased revenue for SPA by the provision of carefully selected online classes and webinars. Final strategy associated with this goal is the development of a best practices guideline and standards for personality assessment for a variety of settings and purposes. A model of this kind of approach could be found in the recent article in the Journal of Clinical Psychology, Science and Practice on best practices in forensic assessment, or Bob Bornstein's recent article in JPA that had to do with empirical basis for personality assessment. APA also recently in January of this year did a seminar on the topic of best practices in forensic assessment that was organized by Dr. Paul Arbisi. All of them are models of what we could do and begin to develop in this area. And the board meeting talked this morning about working, suggesting that we work in collaboration with APA to develop best practice standards, which I think makes great sense. Goal number 3. Third goal involves strengthening SPA's role as the leading resource for providing timely and relevant information on personality assessment. This goal involves several strategic approaches. These strategies include expanding SPA's website and exchange newsletters' role in vetting information on resources in personality assessment. It also involves creating a database of assessment information that's usable by both researchers and clinicians that span a variety of populations. An example of this type of database might be found in the University of Minnesota Press's online research archive that provides a reference database for literally thousands of articles and publications involving various forms of the MMPI from 1939 through 2017. This free database can be accessed and searched by year, by author, by type of publication, as well as by topic area. It is time-consuming and expensive to develop, but it's invaluable to researchers and clinicians trying to get background information in a particular area. Another strategy involves achieving a balance in our journal, conference presentations, and our webinars, a balance that is struck between quantitative research studies based on statistical methodology using large sample sizes, and qualitative studies and case reviews that may be of particular interest to clinicians. Our journal and our conferences have focused effort on balancing this emphasis between researchers and practitioners, and we'll continue to try to refine this balance in the future. I think it's always a moving target, but it's worth the effort to focus on it. A further strategy involves expanding the amount of time at the SPA conferences that's spent on presentations and symposiums that are focused on multi-method, multi-test sessions that go beyond a focus on use of a single instrument or assessment method, unless, of course, that happens to be the MMPI. That's a joke. It was, okay. There's always going to be a place at SPA for workshops and symposiums that are based on a specific method like the Rorschach or the PAI or the MCMI or the MMPI. But we also have to have a clear emphasis on multi-method assessment approaches. The fourth goal is to build a larger, more diverse and inclusive SPA membership. There are several keys, strategies associated with this goal. One of the strategies here is to put emphasis on recruiting and maintaining early career members of SPA. This emphasis includes designating potentially a membership tier that's specific for early career members and a program of mentoring for early career members so that they're paired up with people who have been in the field for a while and can help them in their career development. This strategy is based on a recognition that we perhaps have not been as effective as we wish to be in converting people from student membership into regular membership following the completion of their graduate training years. This emphasis will also obviously help us address the age distribution issues involved in our current membership. Another strategy involves strengthening the activities of SPA interest groups and particularly developing and strengthening SPA chapters. I can remember a time when there were a bunch of SPA chapters across the United States, including chapters in Virginia. Today, there are 5 chapters in total that are listed on the SPA website as active, both across the United States and including international chapters, 5. So developing chapters, particularly those that are based on graduate student programs, is potentially a powerful way of recruiting the future membership of SPA. Another focus will be on creating and implementing a leadership initiative dedicated to mentoring and preparing future leaders. I was reminded of the importance of this recently when Dr. Martin Selbaum was selected as the next next editor of JPA, effective on July 1st, 2018. Now, among the biographical data that Martin had on his CV that I thought was quite striking was the fact that he was involved in SPA as a graduate student when he was at Kent State, and that, in fact, he was the first elected president of SPAGS, our student organization, and sat on the SPA board. That wasn't the only reason that we chose him, for sure, but that was an important factor, that he understood how SPA worked, that he had a history of the organization, and it was a significant factor in his background. So what we found is that Martin is a specific example of what we all know in the abstract, which is that student members of today are the future leaders of SPA tomorrow. We'd also like to reach out to increase the diversity of SPA membership to better reflect the diversity that's found within the general field of psychology. This involves increasing the diversity related to ethnicity, gender, age, but as well diversity in terms of the number of personality assessment interest areas reflected in our membership. Finally, we want to increase the engagement opportunities at our convention. Examples of this include holding a social hour or reception for potentially for first-time attendees at our conference, and proactively reaching out to individuals who might be interested in membership in SPA to invite them to attend our annual conferences. Our 5th goal involves governance of SPA and modifying that governance to increase our effectiveness. One of the strategies to pursue this goal involves assessing the composition and structure of the current board to optimize its organization. The board is currently organized, like many boards, at least in part around committee task force activities, with a tendency to add new members as we undertake new tasks. Now, that's an entirely reasonable approach for an all-volunteer board for increasing the scope of their activities. But it's also a potentially ineffective manner of organizing overall board structure across time. The board tends to grow bigger and bigger. We never terminate members that we've added on. We'd also like to provide orientation to new SPA board members concerning the structure and the process of the board. The first SPA board meeting for all of us who have ever served on the board is a pretty memorable experience, I think. We don't know what the hell is going on, and no one is explaining it to us, so we fastened our seatbelts and went along for the ride and didn't want to look very foolish as we tried to figure out what was going on. What's the structure, how are motions made, who's running what in the board. All of that could be cut considerably shorter if we provided an orientation about how the board is organized and how it functions and who's responsible for what. We're also going to consider the recommendation that we move away from standing committee agendas that tend to be self-perpetuating to agendas that are organized around time-limited objectives. Specifically, we'd like to reorganize our board meeting agendas to align with the strategic plan that I'm talking about today. This is going to be particularly important in terms of being able to accomplish the strategic goals within the framework of our board structure. We believe that we're going to have to modify the board in order to get there from here. The sixth and final objective involves improving our operational and technological infrastructure to better serve the needs of SPA. We have an all-volunteer board that governs by adding more volunteers as we take on new tasks. What would happen, I'm just saying, what would happen if we had a full-time assessment psychologist as a CEO type of individual at SPA, who was a full-time advocate for assessment psychology and who oversaw the progress of SPA on our initiatives and plans? This would be a major investment by SPA, which may or may not be desirable when all the costs and the benefits are fully evaluated. But it's an intriguing possibility. I think that's quite worthy of being on the table of things that we discuss and consider. We need to update our software to make it more flexible and capable of making rapid changes in our website. We need to close the gap between SPA conference expenses and revenue at our conventions, or we're running the risk of increasing conference-related deficits to the point where they're not sustainable. We'll review the possibility of improving and expanding our central office, which for those of you who don't know where it's located is about 30 minutes away from here. 30 minutes? In Falls Church, Virginia. So not very far. But it's currently a fairly small space, and we would like to take a look at that to see if we can either improve that space or perhaps consider other space for the central office that would be more consistent with the effective implementation of our strategic plan and SPA activities. Finally, we'd like to revise and evaluate the SPA Foundation to be a more proactive and effective body for fundraising activities. Our foundation members are dedicated and capable, but the foundation hasn't received the type of attention from SPA that it deserves, or the type of attention that foundations typically receive in organizations similar in size and scope to SPA. So, next slide, please. Believe it or not, I'm about to wrap it up. I know you were. I could see the eyes kind of, but it's all right. In summary, SPA today is a strong organization. It's in the black. It's stable. As noted by our consultant, we could continue doing what we're doing now for the foreseeable future without any difficulty. We're not in a crisis. In other words, it's the perfect time, in my opinion anyway, for us to take a look at a strategic plan to consider where we want to go in the future and how we want to achieve those goals. In the immortal words of that inspiring figure and personality assessment, Yogi Berra, if you don't know where you're going, you could end up somewhere else. The strategic plan that we presented to you today is a vision for SPA that could develop over the next 3 years so that we don't all end up somewhere else. I want to thank you for listening to what was a pretty long presentation, and Dr. Haas and I will try to answer all your questions or comments. And I'd also invite the board members who are in the audience to help us because they were as active in this as we were. In fact, they'll take the more difficult questions, I think. That's the only thing that makes sense. So thank you. Okay. All right, so questions or comments about the strategic plan? Yes. Doc? Sure. Dr. Krishnamurthy. Is it dead? That's because we knew what you were going to say. We cut the mic off right now.
I was going to come up. Well, it's working there. Well, first of all, I want to say, I'm just really excited in hearing about the ways in which the board is considering these new initiatives and directions and re-energizing SPA. It makes perfect sense, Giselle, you were saying about a developmental pathway. For those of us who have been longtime attendees of SPA, on one hand, I think we've really enjoyed the sameness, there's a certain comfort in it. But some of us, I think, speaking for myself, are also getting to the point of saying, but we're not changing the formula. It's very formulaic, and most of us have experiences in other organizations, academia, for example, where the answer to most questions is because it's always been done that way, so people don't change it. So it's really exciting to hear about shaking it up and re-energizing the directions. I had a question and a comment. Several years ago, we established a diversity grant to encourage more attendees, diverse attendees, to come and participate in the SPA convention. So I'm not sure how it turned out this year, but for some time it's been on my mind that rather than wait for somebody to apply for the grant, who may or may not know about SPA, that we might want to actively invite selected diversity experts in the country and invite them early enough so that they are able to plan to come and present and participate. And I think that's a great way of bringing more people into the fold. So yes. My 2 cents.
All right, thank you. I don't know. I know that from this morning's board meeting, we fully allocated all of the support money for diversity and for students and for international students. And that I can't remember where we were in terms of expenditure of diversity funding.
Okay, I can just say it, maybe very loud. We still have the diversity awards. And we allocated seven awards to diversity. But you're right, it should be publicized better.
And on this, you saying that's strategic?
Yeah.
We allocated 7 awards. And in the diversity area, we allocated 80 total awards for various kinds of travel support that totaled close to $48,000. I think most people aren't aware of how much SBA does in terms of support of international students, early career travel, et cetera. But it's a major program for SBA. Thank you.
One thing that I saw missing is that everybody has to make a living as a psychologist. Everybody in this room is a psychologist, and everybody's having to make a living. not going to make a good living if you're going to be a psychotherapist. That's really truly proven if you kind of watch the trends with managed care. You can make a living doing psychological evaluations or personality assessment. So the physical side of this thing, I don't see there's any pitch there at all, is that if you want to have a good future income, the question is, how are you going to do that? So that's my first thought, which is, I think personality assessment provides psychologists the opportunity to make a living, and especially to make a living outside of the health insurance revenue structure, which right now I'm 80% not cash in my function, in my practice, 20% health insurance. So when you're making an early life career decision about how you're going to make a living in the future, personality assessment and psychological testing are powerful tools in that process, and I don't really see that kind of addressed in your pitch. It may seem grossly mercenary for me to even bring the topic up, but somehow or the other you're going to have to make a living, and you don't want to see your standard of living go down. You don't want to see your income decrease as you go through your career. Second, it seems to me that the dynamic factors that are in your plan are forensic assessment and students. So, and I think the board has done a pretty good job of accommodating the role of forensic psychology in the annual meetings. And Nancy Kaiser, Boyd, and I have tried to make our contributions to that.
Okay.
And how do we do that without losing our identity, of course, and not just becoming a branch of APLS?
Yes. Yeah.
Last, I noticed that for a number of years, APLS and SPA met at the same time. And somebody, wisely, I suppose, decided to change that to where now they're not meeting on the same weeks.
Yes. Yes. I changed. Yes, several of us had some input into trying to make that happen. It took a surprisingly long time, not just because, I must say, not necessarily on SPA's end. APLS plans their conferences a long time in advance, and they were locked in for a long period of time. So it actually took 3 or 4 or 5 years to finally get to an open place in scheduling where we could arrange so that we weren't running on top of each other. Yeah, I agree that that's a good thing. We have had historically people having to rush out of this conference to get to APLS or vice versa. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense. What would you say, just out of curiosity, what would you suggest in terms of the issue that we all have to make a living as assessment psychologists? What would you like to see?
So I started off as a graduate student a long time ago, and I was idealistic, and I had no idea about how to run a practice or even how to manage my own personal business affairs. And for a person who doesn't already have those skills, you're going to get abused over the next couple of decades unless you do some fast learning. So I don't know how we would create an economic model as a component of considering personality assessment and psychological assessment as a factor in all of this, in terms of because it's business, it's the ability to make a living. So I don't know how that works. We can probably develop the ideas about it, but I think it has a position in your pitch.
Thank you.
You can make a living doing personality assessment.
Bruce,
Yeah, a couple of.
do you want the mic?
Yeah, grab one. Comments, Marvin. First of all, in terms of your first thing about forensics and the danger of sort of becoming too identified, I think part of the wish that the board has talked about is expanding the role of personality assessment in a variety of directions, not just forensics, but on the border with neuropsych, on the border with IO psychology, personnel, and so on. as far as the pitch, I think part of the problem is graduate students, and I think most of them reinforced by faculty, have a kind of naive view that this is an eleemosynary kind of profession, and we're in it to be helpful and do good and the rest. And it's I think, difficult to try and talk pragmatically about the business side of assessment. One of the things we have been doing is working really hard with APA around reimbursement for assessment, which, as most of you know, has improved, or it did during the last round of CPT coding. So, but I agree that's an important factor.
Last time for one more question. Yes, or comment?
Yeah, my name's Hal Corey. I might sound like a broken record, some of you I've been talking to. And I like that you mentioned IO. So, but I think we should refer to it more broadly as consulting psychology. Okay, for example, when I went to the Division 13's conference, the majority of Division 13 members are clinical psychologists. Okay? But there's always a prefix I hear at this conference when we talk about the personality assessment. And that prefix that's not spoken is clinical. Okay? We talk about reimbursement codes, we talk about insurance, we talk about making money. And I think we're missing the boat. We keep on reinventing ourselves and keep on framing it almost exclusively as personality assessment. And some of you may disagree with that. But I've been coming here for 10 years and I consistently hear that. So, for example, I do research on hope and attachment theory, and for most years, I'm in the innovations in personality assessment group, which means we don't know what has to do with this guy's talk, and we don't want to reject him. Piece, right? So I think we don't focus enough on personality assessment that's not exclusively clinical, that's more strengths-based. We also always say we're psychologists. There are a lot of people actually who don't get licensed who would do what we say is personality assessment. I'm not saying I agree with that. But for example, a lot of people in consulting psychology do what we would consider full personality batteries. They're not doing it with clinical patients. They're making a lot more money, by the way, per assessment. So you want to diversify and make some money, learn how to do personality assessments for strengths and positive development, right? But I don't hear that. So it's mentioned, but then I don't see it followed up with any substance. I know we have Stephen Stark here from Division 14, which is great, relating to competency. But I don't think that competency, proficiency, excuse me, the proficiency for like Division 13 or 14 members isn't going to have a lot of weight. Because for them, they're like, okay, how's it going to benefit me in terms of business? And you usually don't think it does, and so they're not going to go for that. But we could bring a lot of them in here. So I have 20 students in my Side B MBA program that do personality assessment, but they're not doing it clinically. And a lot of times they don't see the relevance when I tell them I'm coming here to this conference. They're like, okay, but they don't think there's a place for me there. So I think we should just expand and think a little more. But that might be quite trying for some in this room to say, okay, maybe we should open it beyond clinical personality assessment more broadly, not just give lip service to it, and kind of expand our scope.
Yeah. Excellent comment. Excellent. We're going to stop, although I'm really pleased that I think that we could have a lot more comments and get into the awards segment of our program. And I have the privilege of the first award, which is to Gene Nebel, Dr. Gene Nebel, for Lifetime Achievement Award. Dr. Nebel earned his PhD in child psychology at St. John's University in 1979. In the mid-1960s, he was a caseworker for New York City Welfare Department and had caseloads in Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brownsville, and the Coney Island section of Brooklyn. He also worked as a drug rehab counselor for the New York City Methadone Maintenance Treatment Program at Jamaica Hospital. He was a mathematics teacher in several Long Island high schools. He did his clinical internship with the New Jersey Department of Human Services, where he received training at both the County Mental Health Clinic and at the Division of Developmental Disabilities Institution, now known as the Johnston Training and Research Center, John Stone. He then became a correctional psychologist at the Youth Corrections Institute at what is now called the Wagner Correctional Facility. He also treated sex offenders at the Middlesex County Adult Correctional Center and at the New Jersey Adult Diagnostic and Treatment Center, which is New Jersey's sex offender treatment corrections institution. He worked as a school psychologist on child study teams in 2 New Jersey school districts. He then became director of psychology at Woodbridge Child Diagnostic and Treatment Center, which is a New Jersey facility that specializes in services for more complex diagnostic cases for children between the ages of 11 and 17. After 7 years there, he transferred to the New Jersey Division of Mental Health and Addiction Services, within which he worked for more than 33 years at 3 state psychiatric hospitals, Marlborough Psychiatric Hospital, Trenton Psychiatric Hospital, and the Greystone Park Psychiatric Hospital, the latter institution he's been at for the past 20 years. He's arranged colloquium for state psychological internship program. Gene has done more than 20 years of adjunct teaching at several universities, including Seton Hall University, Rider University, Rutgers University Graduate School of Education, Rutgers University Graduate School of Applied and Professional Psychology, and the John Jay College of Criminal Justice, which is a part of the City University system in New York. He taught a variety of courses, particularly in the assessment area, such as intelligence testing, personality assessment, and the Rorschach. He served on the New Jersey Psychological Association's conference committee for 25 years, planning and audio recording all of their conferences. He's also recorded numerous meetings and conferences for a variety of psychoanalytic institutions in New York, including the New York Psychoanalytic Institute, the New York Center for Psychoanalytic Training, and the Association for Psychoanalytic Self-Psychology. He recorded his first SPA conference in 1985 in Berkeley. He then, I think, missed 2 or 3 years and then has been present at every conference thereafter. He has provided over 30 years of dedicated service to SPA, a remarkable accomplishment. The next biographical detail about Gene explains a great deal to me, and I think it will to you as well. It explains the nagging question that has bugged me for years, which is how is it possible that these tape recorders appear suddenly in a room and then disappear, tapes are flipped over, and you never see Gene around? How could he do that? How can he be taping 6 sessions simultaneously? It's ridiculous. And now I know how all that's possible. His hobby is magic. He's been a member of the Society of American Magicians for more than 50 years, and for more than 40 years, the International Brotherhood of Magicians. So, Gene, on behalf of the Society of Personality Assessment Board and all of our membership, we want to thank you for your many years of extraordinary service to us. We have a plaque.
I want to thank SPA. I would like to briefly mention the names of a few people who made these recordings possible. First is Shirley Jenks, who died in November 2012. Shirley recorded the introductions onto all of the audio tape cassettes from 1989 to 2006. Next, the people beside Shirley who conscientiously operated the recorders in all the breakout rooms at these meetings: Ray King, Jim Bowers, Lily Groisser, Heidi Camalengo, and Margot Morgan. For those of you who have a smartphone, Google inventor of the traffic light, and you will see photographs of Garrett Morgan, Margot's grandfather. Another person I have to mention is Jim Choka, who year after year helped me to tape down the extension cords in all of the rooms to connect to my recorders. Finally, I want to thank my brother Ken, my brother Hank, his wife Catherine, for coming here to be with me today for this occasion. Thank you.
So I have one brief and one very pleasant task. The brief task is just to fill you in very quickly on where we stood in terms of public affairs advocacy in the past year. As I mentioned to you all last year, there was a project to revise the testing codes. There is unfortunately very little that I can say about that at present, other than that the process is still underway, and there's some hope that by the summer we may have newly defined and more accurate codes for assessment. The second thing is that as SPA's liaison to the APA Board of Professional Affairs, I attended the virtual meeting in the past fall, and while most of what went on was only tangentially relevant to assessment psychology, there was some interest in the development of practice guidelines for the practice of assessment, which, as Bob mentioned in his presentation, that we as a board voted on to endorse. And the idea is that we're going to offer a proposal to partner with whatever APA board turns out to be relevant, which is a bit tricky to find out, to develop guidelines for competent and ethical practice in assessment. So that's kind of where we stand. My other task is a both pleasant and bittersweet one. Catherine Nordahl, who for the last 10 years has been the director of the APA Practice Directorate, and in the last year or two in her spare time heading the ethics office because she has so much spare time, is stepping down at the beginning of May after an incredible run of 10 years. Catherine practiced predominantly assessment psychology for 28 years in Vicksburg, Mississippi, and is really kind of the first one of us to have this kind of position in the APA hierarchy, and has been an incredible friend to assessment, as well as a tireless advocate for professional psychology in general. Those of you who get the Good Practices magazine saw the article about Catherine, and I'll mention just a couple of the things that went on during her tenure. Class action litigations, again, regulatory actions against insurance companies for violating parity laws, and really the APA practice organization under Catherine was really largely responsible for kind of pushing through parity legislation. better relationships with some insurance companies, training and resources on innovative practice models, passage of the Families in Mental Health Crisis Act, and so on. But most importantly, she has really been a friend and advocate of assessment, and thanks to our relationship with the practice organization through Catherine, board members have been meeting with her and her staff on a yearly basis. Assessment is much more in the forefront of APA's concerns, and SPA has much more of a seat at the table now in being able to advocate for concerns around assessment. So as Catherine unfortunately rides off into the sunset of Walla Walla, Washington, really, I know, in order to spend her time relaxing, drinking wine, and I still think you're going to wind up buying a vineyard and growing it, but we just want to express our appreciation to Catherine. So thank you.
I do see some folks out here that I know, but I want to give you a shout out for your strategic plan, and I want to tell you what one of my biggest disappointments has been about APA, really sort of historically, and that has been that they've not taken a much stronger stand about psychological testing and assessment. And I think part of the reason for that is that, and this goes to the issue of do you want to again reconsider being a division of APA, is other than your section in Division 12, at least in terms of clinical practice, and the APLS people certainly do stuff around assessment as well, but they're not banging on the door at APA to get stuff pushed through about assessment. And the Committee for Psychological, speaking of the morass of whatever, the Committee for Psychological Testing and Assessment at APA sits in the Science Directorate, not in the Practice Directorate. And that committee is largely involved with, what do they call it, the Blue Book, the Standards for Psychological Testing and Assessment, or something of that nature that they do in conjunction with a big educational group. And quite frankly, they have not been, I won't say they've not been practice friendly, but I think they forget about practice aspects of testing and assessment when they're sitting and doing their stuff, and they don't come across the aisle to practice and ask us for a whole heck of a lot of support or collaboration. We tried to get them to revise the test user qualifications, which you all have used wonderfully for advocacy, and they decided to make it a competency-based item that was not at all tagged to education and training criteria, which sort of undid the purpose of the previous test user qualifications. We weren't happy about that, and they just decided to take their marbles and go home. So I would encourage you to reconsider the divisional aspect of APA. There are other divisions of APA that are entirely separately incorporated 501c6, and IO, PSYOP is a good example of that. That was in a separate society before it ever became a division of APA. And the way that you influence policy or shake up policy or get the association to pay attention to what it is that you're about is to really have a seat at that table. And one way that you do that, or one way you could do that, is by being a division. You have people elected to the major policy board of APA, and you can begin to do things easily like guidelines and other sorts of things that can bring this field of testing and assessment much more to the forefront of APA. Sadly, I think when managed care, and the gentleman over here talked about testing outside of the healthcare arena, or at least out of the insurance arena, I will tell you from my experience, it is a terrific way to make money, and I'm just going to say that right here in this room. And that's how I supported my commitment to being both a Medicare and Medicaid provider in my practice, because I had very high-end work that I did that was not dependent on healthcare insurance, but was based on my training as a psychologist that allowed me to do other things that I also felt really good about. So business or practice stuff would certainly be appropriate for a 501c6 like you all have, and that's the one thing we hear from from early career people all of the time. Nobody ever told me what the real world was going to be like. Nobody ever told me how to do a business plan. I don't know how to set up a practice. So that may very well be something you might want to consider in some of your work you do here in your convention. So keep the passion and the fire in your belly about testing and assessment. We are psychologists. We do own it. We should own it. And many of you know that there are threats to that in a lot of places in the marketplace or in state legislatures and that sort of thing. So the advocacy is really important. And that might be another benefit of considering a divisional relationship with APA, is you would have the advocacy resources with an APA to help support the kind of advocacy that you want to do. So thank you very much for this. I am indeed riding off into the sunset. I will no longer be doing clinical practice. I will be sipping a little wine because that's good for your heart. Not too much, but a little. And hope to get back into doing some other interesting things that I haven't been able to do very much of for the last 10 years. But it's been a great ride at APA, and I'm very heartened to see the large percentage of your membership that are APA members. I think that's great. So thank you very much. I appreciate this.
We wanted to take some time at this meeting to recognize Dr. Stephen Upridge and his editorship of the Journal of Personality Assessment. Dr. Upridge is a professor of psychology at the University of Detroit Mercy, where he serves as a core faculty member in their APA-accredited PhD program in clinical psych. He serves as the president of the International Society for the Study of Personality Disorders, and of course, as the editor of our journal, the Journal of Personality Assessment. He's a fellow of the American Psychological Association, as well as the Society of Personality Assessment. And in 2013, he was recipient of the Theodore Milan Award for Outstanding Mid-Career Accomplishments in Personality Psychology, which is given by Division 12 of the American Psychological Association and the American Psychological Foundation. Dr. Upridge is the author or editor of 6 professional texts, over 100 peer-reviewed papers, and over 200 professional presentations. He's also a licensed psychologist, and he maintains in his spare time, how he generates that is beyond me, but in his spare time, he runs a part-time clinical practice. He has served as the associate editor for the Journal of Personality Disorders, secretary-treasurer for ISSPD, and he's the coordinator of masters. He has been the coordinator of master's and doctoral programs at 2 universities. He holds adjunct faculty appointments in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Sciences at Michigan State University and at the University of Kansas School of Medicine in Wichita, as well as in their Department of Family and Community Medicine. Dr. Upridge will leave the editorship of JPA on June 30, 2018, after 5 years of dedicated service. He leaves behind an outstanding legacy marked by his commitment to advancing the science and the practice of assessment psychology. He also leaves behind a fearless willingness to engage the journal in societal issues and to promote an awareness of the role of psychological assessment in understanding and confronting the problems facing the United States and the world. I could give you a lot of illustrations of this, but I think the best single one was Steve's editorial in JPA in 2016 entitled, "Psychologists Should Help Curb the Wave of U.S. Gun Violence," which led to a symposium on that topic at the last SPA conference, and will lead to a forthcoming special issue on this topic in the Journal of Personality Assessment. On behalf of the SPA board and the membership of SPA, I wish to thank Dr. Upridge for all he's done to make JPA the influential and prestigious journal that it is today. I have it, yep, you got it right?
Thank you.
We have a plaque that we gave Steve that has 3 journal covers. The journal cover when he took over as the editor of JPA, the journal cover in the center, which occurred when we've changed the cover design for JPA and presented a new face, and the centennial, the 100th issue of JPA.
Thank you.
Did you want to?
Yes. Yes. Well, thank you very much, Bob, and thank you all for this really nice recognition. It's really been my honor and privilege to serve the journal and the society this way for the past 5 years. Hopefully, I have enhanced the quality of the journal over my tenure as editor and strengthened its already wonderful and excellent international reputation. I'm so appreciative of the support of the board and the publishers who've been so helpful for me during my tenure as editor. And I also appreciate the countless hours of work that our associate and consulting editors have given to support the journal's work. And I know that JPA would not be as successful as it had not been for their hard work and service. They really do an outstanding job, and I'm so privileged to work with them. I also want to thank a few other people for their individual efforts in supporting me as editor. First and foremost, I express my deepest and most heartfelt thanks to Sharon Nelson, who's quietly but very powerfully there in the corner. Sharon, would you, I'm sorry to embarrass you, would you please stand? Please thank her for her work. Sharon's been a highly capable and effective editorial assistant over the past 4 years. She's managed the journal's business efficiently and quite competently. I also want to thank Monica Toon for all your support over the years and our working together, and also a number of individuals at Taylor and Francis Publishers, including Knockley, Megan Hine, Amanda Ashworth, and Kevin Bradley, all of whom have given so much to the journal and just have really helped JPA thrive, and we really owe them a debt of gratitude. Finally, I'm looking forward to seeing the journal's evolution in the next several years. I wish Dr. Selbaum all the best as editor, and thank you again for the chance to be your editor. Thanks. Okay. As most of you know, each year the JPA editor and associate editors select 2 papers for special recognition at the annual convention. The Walter Klopfer Award is given to the best empirical paper published during the year, and Martin Maiman Award is given for the best theoretical or non-empirical paper published in the same year. The nomination process begins with asking the consulting editors to nominate papers they believe merit an award. This list of nomination is then reduced to those 3 papers in each category receiving the top number of nominations. As in the past, we again this year saw a large number of nominations for both the Klopfer and the Maiman Awards. 32 members of the editorial board submitted a total of 30 nominations for the Walter Klopfer Award and 13 nominations for the Martin Maiman Award. The associate editors and I then ranked the top 3 papers, and the ones with the highest mean rankings received the award. This year, I'm very pleased to announce that the winners of the Walter Klopfer Award are Drs. Anna Hartley and R. Michael Furr for their paper, A Profile-Based Framework for Factorial Similarity and the Congruence Coefficient. Dr. Furr happens to be one of our statistical editors, and I'm so delighted to be able to present this award to him, who's also accepting on behalf of Dr. Hartley. Would you please join me in congratulating Drs. Hartley and Furr for their fine accomplishment? We'll get the picture afterwards. Thanks. And then last but certainly not least, it's really my distinct pleasure to give the Martin Maiman Award to my dear friend of over 20 years, Dr. Robert Bornstein, for his paper, Evidence-Based Psychological Assessment. Please join me in congratulating Dr. Bornstein for this fine accomplishment. All right.
Hi, I'm Jill Clements. I'm on the Board of Trustees as a representative. I'm the awards chair. So I have the great honor of announcing the Early Career and the Student Paper Award. The first award we're going to announce today is the Samuel J. and Ann G. Beck Award. It's bestowed annually for outstanding early career research in the field of personality assessment. Fields transform because of advancements in method. No one's work exemplifies this better than that of this year's award recipient, Aiden Wright. Dr. Wright is an assistant professor in the Department of Psychology at the University of Pittsburgh. He joined the faculty there in 2014 after receiving a PhD in clinical psychology from Penn State University in 2012. Prior to that, he was an intern at the Western Psychiatric Institute and Clinic, University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine, and completed an individual NIMH postdoctoral fellowship at the State University of New York at Buffalo. Since 2009, Dr. Wright has been a prolific researcher in personality, serving as an author on over 100 peer-reviewed journal articles and several chapters in this area. Currently, he's an associate editor at the Journal of Personality and a consulting editor at the Journal of Abnormal Psychology, Journal of Consulting and Clinical Psychology, Clinical Psychological Science, and the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology. Be on the lookout for his new book with co-editor Michael Halquist, titled The Cambridge Handbook of Research Methods in Clinical Psychology, soon to be published by Cambridge University Press. Please join me in congratulating Dr. Wright.
Thank you very much, Jill. I'd like to say thank you for this recognition and how much I really appreciate it. I clearly have a lot to say, although I seem to be at a loss for words now. I do appreciate coming back to SPA every year and seeing a lot of the friendly faces. It resonated with me when the comments were presented that it feels like coming home to family and seeing old friends and faces. I'm looking at you, Paula. At any rate, this is a great honor because my first publication was in the Journal of Personality Assessment, and although I've done things since then, I think it's important to recognize that, for me at least, personality is a team sport, and that this is the best part about this has been working in collaboration with many other people. Some who are checking their phone in the back, like Chris Hopwood, who's been one of my major collaborators. Or there's Nicole Kane, also hanging out in the back. Clearly, I like to hang out with the kids who hang out in the back. At any rate, I really appreciate this. And there was recently I saw something on Twitter about an award they give in Europe where the person who gets recognized then picks, I don't know, 7 or 9 other people who have been collaborators of theirs, and I could easily name well more than that. And so I want to thank everyone who I've worked with and people who I continue to work with, including my 2 graduate students, William Woods and Elizabeth Ederschild, who came with me for the first time this year. So thank you very much.
Okay. And our final award is the Mary S. Cerny Award. It's given annually to the best student paper generated over the past year dealing with some aspect of personality assessment. This year's recipient is Trevor Williams for his paper, The Construct Validity of General and Specific Dimensions of Personality Pathology, published in Psychological Medicine. Trevor's a clinical psychology doctoral student at the State University of New York at Buffalo under the mentorship of Dr. Leonard Sims. His research interests involve the development and validation of structural models of personality pathology. In particular, he's interested in using social cognitive laboratory tasks to provide a better understanding of how structural models of pathological personality traits relate to clinically relevant momentary processes. Following graduation, Trevor plans to pursue a faculty position at an academic institution where he can continue his research. If anybody knows of any job openings, Trevor's available. Please join me in congratulating Trevor as he receives this award.
First off, thank you so much for recognizing my work. This is a great honor. And just to be brief, because I'm the last award, I wanted to thank my mentor, Len Sims, who unfortunately couldn't be here. He was absolutely central in the development of this paper and my training, obviously, in general. I'd also like to thank my co-author, Matt Skalko, on this. He was very helpful in training me in the methods of this. And finally, my statistics professor, who originally inspired me to do this paper for her class. So thank you all for listening to my little spiel. Thank you.
Thank you for your attendance. We're now going to take a break, and at 3:15, Tom Whittaker will be presenting as part of the Bruno Klopfer Award. Thank you.